This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, hello everybody. Hi Ginat. My name is Massimo Conte. I'm Italian. I live in Israel for 11 years now. And I have a past as a therapist, human energy field therapist. I worked on the human energy field in sessions. I gave groups and courses for something like 15 years in the past. I don't do it anymore. Um, um, So I learned this. I started. I would like to tell very briefly my story and also about the topic of that I'm presenting today. I started from stories, from experiences that I had. I'm going to talk about the moments in which uh, we're going to leave the body. We're going to leave the world and die. The body dies, and maybe something else uh, is going to unfold. So I started to work on myself and to study human energy field just for my interest. I never thought to become or to work as a therapist, but after only 6 months that I started, I was asked to become a therapist by a very young woman that was very sick with a very severe disease. And she knew that I was studying and practicing and meditating and taking sessions for myself. So one day she asked me, "Can you be my therapist?" And at the same time, my teacher told me, "I think you should work as a therapist because you are talented." So I just started like that. And I started with my first client who died 2 years uh, 2 years after 2 years of working together, 2 years and a half maybe. Um, and and this made my teacher wondering, how come your first client is something with such a severe disease? And I mean, a disease that we know that she's going not to live long. Uh, so I still wonder about that. But um, it's very, that was my first experience, my first case. Let's say this. Um, when this woman was at the hospital in the last days of her life, um, she completely she made a change, a big change before dying. I couldn't go to the hospital, so I was like in a heart-to-heart, mind-to-mind connection with her, and we had many friends in common. They went to the hospital, they went to visit her, and then they told me that she died really very well. Her mother was also with her. She died in peace. She made peace with herself. She made peace with her parents, and she was Christian, but she was never baptized. And few hours before leaving the body, she saw a priest walking in the corridor of the hospital, and she called for him, and she wanted to be baptized. And I was at home, and also with the supervision of my teacher. My teacher told me, "Okay, you can connect with her," and so I did. And tell her to go where all the masters are. I didn't know even what she meant, but that was my intention during the meditation while I was connected with this woman at the hospital. And I had a lot of body sensations, and I saw um, figures made of light, and she was in the middle. Um, and I had especially the most important thing was the feeling that she was safe, and that her soul was moving toward a big change for the better, for the best. And this was I got a phone call after a few days by her mother, and she told me that she how she died. She died with a smile in her lips. She was at the end she was mostly unconscious, but she woke up. She looked at her mother, and the mother told her, "You can live in peace. Um, I will take care of your children." And this woman, her name is Monica, was Monica. She smiled to her mother, and she just left like this. No, with she had a very severe disease, and the body was fine. The skin, usually it's a disease that they die with a lot of plaques and bleeding. Um, Also, our friends told me that they could go to visit her without any protection because she was not infectious, she was not dangerous to anybody. So she had a very good death, and in some way, I was there, and and I realized because I was going into on and off meditation in the next days, and I realized that there was still a connection, and that she was yeah, she was like in a journey uh, um, to maybe to find the best of herself, something like that. And this was my first experience. The second one, um, I'm telling you about these experiences because I'm not an academic. I learn through experience, from experience. Um, so the second one was with my father. My father died at 82, quite quickly because of a cancer in the intestine. And the chemotherapy, a light one couldn't do anything, and a strong one practically destroyed the body, his body. Um, so in the last 2 or 3 days, he was unconscious. He died at home. All the family, my mother and my brothers and me, we were there around him. And the last time he woke up, he looked at me, and we had the chance to say hello, bye bye, and just to talk very little, and then he fell unconscious again. So I remember this was in 2007, quite many years ago. I remember that in the afternoon I lay down on bed. I was into meditation, and at a certain point, my mind was completely empty, without any thought. Nevertheless, I knew exactly what was going on. The door of the room was closed. I heard somebody, and there was like thoughts were coming to my mind, and it was me. It was not me thinking, just the thoughts were thinking me. And I heard my voice saying, "This is my brother Enrico. He is coming to me to say that Dad is going." So I got up, I opened the door of the room, and my brother was in front of me, and I said, "Yes, I'm coming." We went down together, and even my body was moving by itself. without me thinking what to do, where to go, what to say. The mind was completely blank. There was a very strong sense of presence, and we gathered, all the family gathered in front of my father. He was in bed in the living room, and we just in silence we watched him taking the last breath. And after a while, I went back to lay down in bed, and I asked myself, Dad, where are you? And I felt my body lifted up very strongly and quickly, lifted up, and I found myself in a place full of light, and with the feeling that everything was fine, that he was fine, uh, uh, that everything was fine, and that's it. It happened something like that again with when my mother died. With my mother was very different. Um, with my mother, it was like a process of almost wanting to get lost, almost wanting to not uh, not go farther. Um, yeah, the main feeling was like I want to get lost. I don't want, I want to more than die. I want to like to stay in death and not I don't know, recycle myself, something like that. And then it happened again. I had this experience again a few years ago with a cousin of mine. It was a cousin that from my father's side, we haven't spoken for years because because we lived very far away from each other. We almost didn't know each other, and then we got in touch 1 year and a half before he died. Um, he died very young because when he was young, he was very sick, and he survived for 30, 40 years with a very severe disease. And with him, he was a very um, he was a philosopher. He was all the time thinking about uncertainty. He was all the time philosophizing over life, his life, the meaning of his life. Um, how come he survived so long with a severe disease? And nevertheless, he was a very smart guy, and he was a very good guy, very warm-hearted. So when I got the news that he died, that he left, I got it from his wife. I went into meditation. I connected with him, and uh, and I stayed with him for almost 3 days, on and off, because I think because of his passion in inquiring life and evaluating. I think it was for 3 days, almost 3 days after the death of the body, it was like in a process of evaluation to decide what to do next. And he didn't. I remember that he didn't want to to choose the first option. He wanted to choose for the best, and it was that in that case it was really like a process, quite a long process. Then after these experiences, um, I read a couple of books. Um, I can show you the cover of these books. One is not the Tibetan book of the living and the dead, but it's the Tibetan book of living and dying. I don't know if you can See it from here, I can publish later. This is a commentary on the by Sogyal Rinpoche. It's a kind of commentary on the Tibetan book of Living and Death. And it describes very well, much more than I told you. I mean, it describes all what happens when the body is going to die, when the body is declared dead. And he also describes what's going to happen in the next 3 days after the body is declared dead. We know today that it's scientifically proved that for 3 days, 2 to 3 days after a doctor declares a body dead, there is still electrical activity in the brain. It's a very, very light, but there is. That's why in Buddhism, for example, they don't touch the body after death. They don't touch it for 3 days. Unless if the body needs to be moved, they move it with a lot of care and, with monks praying and burning incense and reciting mantras. So I read all this after I had the 4 experiences I told you. And I mean, what I read is is much more than I experienced, but I realized that what I experienced is on the same line, is goes accordingly to what is written in this book. Then I read another book that is also very funny, and it's by Yongey Mingyu Rinpoche. It's called In Love with the World. And this is the story of this. He was an abbot of a monastery, and he wants to leave the monastery without telling anybody. And he wants an itinerant retreat. He wants to do yoga and meditation while living a human life out of the monastery. So at the beginning, everything is fine, and then he gets sick, and he's going to die alone, without any care, support, help, and so he describes, but he's still aware of what's going on in the body, in the mind. He's aware that he's leaving the body, he's leaving the world, and he describes whatever he experiences in these moments, sensations, feelings, thoughts, and he is extremely precise. And again, what he describes goes accordingly to what is written in the other book and what I experienced. So from all this, that took something like a 15 years span, I learned that through myself, through my experience, I learned that when we live the world the same way we come into the world. In Western psychology, they say that we don't come to the world with a sense of identity, but we build a sense of identity, a sense of self in the environment and through the environment where we grow up. So we create a construction that is me as I know myself. And in the few days after we leave the body, I learned that there is still a presence that is a personal presence. It's very close, it's very similar to what I am according to how I know myself. And this self as to merge again with a much vaster consciousness. And I think the way we do this process, I think the way we merge with this vaster consciousness could be very important to um, um, not just to gather, but to hold all the awareness that has been with us in this lifetime, and we can take it with us to um, wherever we are going to go or to be. Um, I also learned that I also practiced in a Buddhist lineage after I had most of these experiences. And I think a practice that could be functional and helpful to train ourselves to for this moment, the moment of leaving the body. It's called sleep and dream yoga. It's I put it simple. I make it simple because if you read a book of practices and meditations in Buddhism, sometimes it's very hard to understand what they really mean. Um, it's a very simple practice. Um, let's say that every night we go to bed and we fall asleep, and we fall asleep without thinking maybe tomorrow morning there is a chance that we won't wake up. Usually we assume that we fall asleep and then tomorrow morning I will wake up. I have many things to do tomorrow. So this is our assumption usually. Uh, but try to falling asleep while being awake. I mean, being really present on the falling asleep. Uh, maybe it's better not to do it in the evening because you risk that you don't fall asleep at all. I usually do it. I still do this practice, not every day, but almost in the afternoon. Whenever I have the chance to take a nap in the afternoon, I let the body fall asleep, but I keep the mind awake. I mean, I'm watching the falling asleep as much as I can, as long as I can. And I believe that this is very useful to get acquainted with this change of perspective, change of presence, leaving the physical world, leaving perception, and uh, and project ourselves toward a dimension that is not physical. This is a very good practice, I think, and it's very simple. Simple. It's not easy, but you can do it, and then after a while you will see that it could happen that you're still present in the very first 20 minutes of sleeping. It's called hypnagogic sleeping, and it happens in the very first 20 minutes after we fall asleep. The mind is switched off and on, off and on, and you can experience this. It's very nice. And if you just put your attention, I think it's not difficult to experience this off and on of the mind. What time is it? Questions are welcome.
What's the name again? What's it called?
Hypnagogic.
Hypnagogic.
Hypnagogic. It's the first 15, 20 minutes of sleeping after we fall asleep. it takes 15-20 minutes really to switch completely off the mind.
Okay,
In
well,
that period, we can still train ourselves to be present and just experience this, mind that is producing content and then switching off, and there is nothing, no content, but there is still presence. And then the content comes back, and you can have thoughts, feelings, you can see something, and then again the mind switches off and then on again, and it does like this for 15-20 minutes, more or less.
Massimo, I have a question for you.
Yes.
The first patient who asked you to be her therapist,
Yes.
and did I understand correctly, you and she were together for over 2 years, 2.5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And she was very ill to begin with.
What do you mean? Yeah, she was very ill.
Yes.
She was sick with HIV at the
Yes.
last stadium.
Yes,
last
that's what it sounded like.
Mm.
And what kind of therapy was it that you were doing with her?
At that time, I was working on the energy field of the person with my hands. According to the Brennan healing science, I studied privately with the teacher of the Brennan Healing School, Barbara Brennan Healing School. Barbara Brennan is the author of a very famous book that is titled Hands of Light. Here it is, yes. So the school of Barbara Brennan at that time was based in the United States. It is still there. And they opened a branch in Europe. I never went to the school. I studied because, I didn't think to become a therapist. So I just studied for myself. And I studied with a teacher of the school of Barbara Brennan. Also, she was a friend of her. And I studied with her for 6 years. In 6 years, I took something like 4 to 5 hours a month of private sessions, seminar, a weekend seminar every 3 months for 6 years. I had supervision by her over all my clients. And so the core of this therapy is to usually we started the session talking, so sitting in front of each other and talking. And then the second part of the session, the client was laying down on a bed, and I was working without touching the body. Most of the time, I was working with my hands over the energy field, over the structures of the energy field. And I was very sensitive in that period. I could even now, but now I don't practice anymore, so I'm a bit rusty. But at that time I just was concentrated and paying attention and looking at the person and listening to the person, looking at the field, and I could see even inside the body what was going on inside the physical body. I could have many informations. And at the beginning, I was used to, I was a beginner. So I thought therapy was about doing something, fixing the energy field. But then it didn't took me so long to understand that if I fix something in the structure of the energy field, but the person doesn't become aware of it, after 5 minutes or after 1 day or 5 days, the energy field and the issue gets back to the previous situation. So I started to not work on the field anymore, not using my hands, and just sitting in presence in front of the other person. And I started to use all the information that I was gathering from the energy field of the person to build a dialogue and to build through questions in a way with the hope to bring the person herself to become aware of the issue, aware of the reason why of the issue, the purpose of the issue. So to start, so that the person could start a change by herself. So my work became, in a few years, became just a work of presence, sharing the presence in front of the other.
And conversation.
Yes, we were talking, not too much, because, I don't know if you know, but in a session or in a therapy session, whenever you let the person talk, the person is going to talk too much usually, and I usually stop it, and I try to bring the person back to feel what's going on in the body, and feel what's looking at the mind, what's going on in the mind. And usually in the energy field therapy, we use also body work. We use sounds, really making sounds with my mouth, for example, close to the body or in specific parts of the field of the client. And basically, you start from telling your story, telling about your issue that is in the energy field. And while we talk about our issues, the energy field is showing the issue, literally. Then you stop talking, you stop telling the story, you just have to tell the main things of the story, of the issue, and then you move to a deeper dimension of the energy field that is intention. In intention, there are no thoughts, there are no emotions, so there is no story and no grab on the issue. Intention is something pure, it's very fast, it's very quick, and then from there, we usually went into non-doing. It's just presence, and let the presence radiate through the dimension of intention to the dimension of the energy field and the body. This is very shortly the process that I used to with people, that I used with people.
Excellent. And then at the moment that the young woman was in the hospital and approaching the end, she saw the priest in the hallway and called for him. At that time, you were connected to her through meditation or mentally, and you saw that she was in a grouping of light figures.
Yes. I do it intuitively. I mean, I just have to think about a person. It must be a person that I know, at least a bit. Somebody that I not necessarily met face to face. It can happen even with, I can do it with the people that I just spoke the phone with. But I need to some kind of contact with this person. And then I just think about this person in meditation. I close my eyes and I feel through my body, through my mind, what's going on in the mind of the other person. Usually it's something that the other person asks for. I mean, the other person wants to show something. Usually it's something that the person itself don't want to see, but they want other people to see it. So in a way to have a mirroring, to have somebody that shows them back what's going on. I think this is one of the basic, one of the foundations of one-to-one therapy. You go to a therapist, my opinion is just mirroring what's going on in the other person. I go to a therapist and I feel good when the therapist tells me something that moves the energy in me, in my mind, and makes me realize something new, something that I didn't want to see previously. So yeah, it happened with this woman, with my father, that there were beings made of light around around her, around my father, around me, because I felt like I was there with them in some way. It didn't happen with my mother and with my cousin. That was completely different. It was more like a process. I had the feeling that, Monica, my first client, and my father, Marcello, they were much more open, maybe also just open to recognize what was good, and they choose very quickly. For my mother was a very closed person. For her, it was different. Now I remember I had also one more experience with a very dear friend. A very dear friend that was, vegetarian. She never smoked. She was a therapist, art therapist. She was extremely sensitive, a very good person. But she died of a cancer in 2 months. And I had the chance, she was in Italy, I was in Israel, and by chance, I was in Italy, I went to Italy and I went to meet her just 3 days before she died. So I had the chance to greet her, and she was taken care by a very good friend of her. And when I saw her, she looked fine. And then I came back to Israel, and the day after, her friend called me, sent me a message saying that she was very sick again at the hospital, and the day after she died. I connected with her, and she was also full of light. She was in a situation really full of light. So I just connected with her. I had again this feeling that everything was fine. She was taking care of herself by herself, very in a very good way. And so that was another experience. There is always, in my experiences, I saw some people are surrounded by light. They surround themselves by light and awareness and love since the beginning of the dying process. Since the mind is like closing all the files uh, and preparing the files for the next switching on. And other people are like in a process. They look for the light. They look for the light. They look for the want. They look for what they would like to become, or something like that. I saw these two kind of cases, but also, in the where when there was light, there was always the feeling. I mean, the feeling of love, care, um, peace, no worries, no issues. Everything is good. It was there. On the other cases, while people are evaluating, there is still, it's just different, but there is still love, and there is still a lot of attention and for details. Um, there is still, everything is good. Uh, More questions? What can I say? I wonder if I will be able to give this support to myself, by myself, when it will be the time for me to. I have no idea. I um, I don't know, but I watched my father dying, and I had the feeling that even if he was unconscious in the last 24 hours, just looking at him and being connected with him in that moment, I had the feeling that in some way he was taking care of himself by himself. So I think it's a possibility for all of us. Imagine, I wanted to show you, I don't know if we have time, it's a 3-minute video. I can let's share, if I know how to do it, share my video, my screen. Somebody can help me.
And now, Massimo, you can begin the video. Begin again.
Western self-psychologists tell us that we're not born with a psychological sense of self. It develops somewhere between 12 and 24 months when representational thinking develops. And what it means is the self is constructed. The more I have a strong sense of self, the more it serves as a central organizing principle for my daily experience. It provides continuity over time and space. So over the course of my life, in the time elapses, I feel like the same person. That's what the mind does, it constructs. It constructs an out there world. Visual forms are constructions. The sense of self is a construction. Sound is a construction. If you look at time in a certain way, you can see beyond time, and even that's a construction. And the trouble is that we tend to make those constructions too real or too solid, as if they're independently existing. And the consequence of that is that we reifier the world, making it too real or too solid. And that has two negative consequences. One is it has grab. A lot of the suffering of my daily life is organized around self-grab. And second, it has the capacity to obscure my true nature. And if you start looking at all these constructions of mind as constructions and see beyond them, then you get back to how it's all basically constructed from awareness. The whole show is made from the expressive, lively aspect of awakened awareness. The metaphor is like the sun. At some point, the clouds clear away. We often say the sun came out, but that's not exactly correct. The sun is always shining, except that from our perspective of being under the clouds, we can't see the sun's always shining. And it's like that with the awakened mind. The limitless, boundless, awakened awareness is always right here.
And if you're interested by Claudia Bichen, you can find in YouTube more videos of terminal patients, people who were very close to die, and they tell their story, and they tell very interesting, they share very interesting point of views about the last moments. Okay, thank you.